We are here with Jeannine Rashidi. She is Ayurvedic practitioner and trauma specialist and author. And I'm so happy to have her here again because we had a summit together and the summit was great. I love her interview and I asked her to be in her individual interview today. She had a book already published called Abundance, right? Beyond.
Uh-huh.
Yes, beyond.
Abundance beyond trauma.
Yes, yes. Welcome to my show, Janine.
Thank you, Pantea. It's an honor to be here again.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, tell me about yourself. I know in Summit we didn't have so much time to talk about this, but if you just tell me what you do, what's your biography, and why did you happen to be a trauma specialist?
So I came from 25 years of severe physical, mental, emotional, psychological, and sexual trauma. It came from my parents and then my first husband. And so what happened was I, ran away from home to try to get away from that at the age of 15. I was a straight A student. Luckily, I had amazing teachers that supported me in school. But the biggest challenge I had was that there were no classes to teach me how to deal with what was going on at home. So I felt running away would be better. So I learned how to live homeless. I met some Vietnam veterans who had flashbacks. Of course, at that time, I didn't realize I had PTSD. And then it was through living homeless that I actually met who would be my first husband. And what happens is if you don't heal the trauma that you've had, statistically, you may end up in the same situation, or worse, you may become somebody who creates trauma. And so I ended up with basically another abuser. And through that 10-year relationship, I had 2 daughters. And by the time I was 25, I left that relationship and started a new life. And so I wanted a profession where I could essentially just take care of my children, but also be there in a way that I wanted, take them to school, events. So 9 to 5 wasn't going to work for me. And so I began looking at different trade schools, and I became a massage therapist to start, thinking I'll just create my own business. I had somewhat of a marketing background. And then what I noticed was the clients that were coming in all had trauma, and they just started naturally releasing on the table all of their emotions. And so I questioned, am I the right person to be supporting these clients, because I'm fresh into my healing. And now here I am 18 years later, and, having gone through many other certifications where I would, whether it was Psych K, some sort of process acupressure, somatic healing. I got into the science of Ayurveda to look at more of the gut digestion, mental digestion, overall health and wellness to support my practice. And that's actually how I became a specialist in trauma, not only from healing from my own personal journey, but now supporting clients. So here I am today. I have a year left in my doctorate program to be a doctor of Ayurveda. And, I've written my book, Abundance Beyond Trauma, in hopes to inspire others to awaken the healer within, because healing is possible. And part of what's in my book is the adhere process that I created on how to get through a trigger and heal that particular trigger. And then there's also the I'm Triggered Pocket Guide, along with different worksheets and a workbook that goes along with it.
So tell me about Ayurvedic practice. I know I had some other interviews with other practitioners, but we never go deep into it. So can you just tell me more about this and
Sure.
how did it work for you? Did you use it for yourself? Yes.
So Ayurveda it literally translates from a Sanskrit word to science of life. And it's the original medicine that originated in India. So it's about as ancient as the Chinese medicine. And the basis of it is that we are connected with nature. So there's the 5 elements in nature, there's 5 elements within us. We call them doshas. And when those go out of balance, that's when dis-ease happens. And we see that in our world. Like right now, I'm in California and we haven't had enough rain. Therefore, we're in a drought. We're experiencing the dis-ease of that lack of that element. Well, the same thing happens within our system. So I am a firm believer in the science of Ayurveda, one, because it helped me, continues to help me, and has helped many of my clients. So when I first came to Ayurveda, I had depleted my system so dramatically with intense dieting, and because I used to be obese and trying to get down to that, ideal number that the medical chart said I should be at, along with all of the PTSD, hypertension, anxiety, depression that came coming out of, all of that trauma. And it had finally taken its toll. And I had an experience where I had passed out. And when I went to the MDs and they did the brain scans, they couldn't give me an official diagnosis. In fact, they said I had a spell. That was the official diagnosis. And I thought, maybe I need a witch doctor. I'm only partially kidding, but that's what I thought when I heard, spell. So I looked up Ayurveda. I had been introduced to it through a book that my husband had given me many years prior. And I went in to see the Vaidya, which is the word for Ayurvedic doctor. And his name's Dr. Jayarajan Kudikanath. So he is my Ayurvedic doctor and my Ayurveda teacher. And he spent 90 minutes with me. He looked at my tongue. He looked at my eyes, my nails, asked me various questions about bowel movement, digestion. He took my Ayurvedic pulse, where he just put 3 fingers, on my artery here, and he, basically told me, "Okay, I have a plan for you." And I was amazed. No doctor had ever spent that amount of time with me, and confidently told me that he had a plan. And basically, there were many elements out of balance. And so here I am now, 8, 9 years later, and way more in balance than I've ever been, and understand when I'm starting to notice those signs of coming out of balance and what to do to come back into balance, what foods to eat to stay balanced. And there are certain foods that will actually increase anxiety. They'll also increase depression. And so it's really important to have this information, because it's one thing to maybe take medicine for certain conditions, but what if the problem is actually what you're eating is creating the dis-ease?
That's very similar to Chinese medicine.
There's
What?
definitely a
Yeah,
similarity.
very similar. Because as I see, when you get back to our ancestors, they use the same thing. Because even in Iran, we have traditional medicine, almost the same thing. All of them look at the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't believe that you are a piece. Like everything, all the organs are very related. That's what happened in functional medicine. So they don't they don't specifically diagnose something. We don't want to just go through the paper. We try to go to whole system. That's
Yeah.
interesting. All of them are very similar, and that's why I love holistic medicine, and I totally believe that holistic medicine can tightly work with conventional medicine. And we need both of them, because even with
Agreed.
conventional medicine, there are some very acute situation that you cannot cure with holistic medicine, because holistic medicine needs more time.
Mm-hmm.
So you need at least 90 days for like 120 days, even more. I don't know, depends your situation. So yeah, that's interesting. I like the conception of this practice. Thank you so much. All right, so tell me about triggers. Again, this is a very massive discussion, and most of the time I talk about it, but I think it still is not enough.
Yeah.
Everybody triggered with trauma, and the interesting point is a lots of chronic disease happen because trauma accumulated in our cellular. Every piece of our body remember our trauma,
Yes.
even if we try to forget what happened to us. But again, every piece of our body try to remind us. And
True.
let's say when I talk to a homeopath about my asthma, and she actually looked at all the traumas I had in my life because I had PTSD. I didn't know, and it took me some time to recover. And then I realized that everything happens from those trauma that I had.
Yep.
So yeah, so interesting. So tell me about this. What first of all, how did you confront with traumas, your own trauma, and what do you recommend to others?
So my journey of trauma, when I came out of that first 25 years, every part of me was guarded. So in relationships, how I was living my life, there was always this sense of looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next shoe to drop, not feeling like I could trust anyone for obvious reasons. You know, my trauma came from mother, which is our first initiation with any feminine relationship. Then it came from father, so first initiation with male. And then my first intimate relationship, consensual intimate relationship, was then also traumatizing. So on various levels, there was no trust. And then I was just continually triggered. So what does that mean? To be activated. In other words, somebody does something, you hear something, you smell something, you see something, and all of a sudden you're no longer present. Or you have this reaction, which was my experience, that upon reflection after the reaction, it seems very unresolved, almost even immature. Like maybe a child throwing a fit, whether it's visible on the outside, it was definitely understood on the inside, you know, how I was feeling. And so for me, when I say trigger, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to associate it with what you feel is under the blanket of trauma. It's any adverse life experience that was too hard to digest within your psyche. And I say that because a lot of people don't realize that they have many of these events, and that's what's causing some of the issues in their life. So while it may not be as obvious as a full on PTSD trigger, it could be just a feeling of something's not quite right, or I can't quite interact well here. Why is that? Or those topics where you're like, oh, I'll deal with anything but that topic. Those are the places that, you know, we need to look. And so when I wrote my book, the biggest contribution I wanted to make was, how do I give somebody help immediately? Because I wished I would have had that immediate help. And so that's why I created the I'm Triggered Pocket Guide, to help get you out of a trigger, and then the adhere process that will help you heal that trigger. So when there's a trigger, there's a disconnect that happens. So here's the event of trauma or something that was too hard to handle. And when it's too hard to handle, we disconnect, trying to cope. Well, that part of us is still disconnected. So here you are now, you're going through life, but what about this part of you? Well, it's still stuck in that trauma time loop or adverse life experience. So then here you are going through life, and then an event happens that triggers that part of you. So that unresolved, disconnected aspect is now what's responding to this life event, but it's coming from a disconnect. So sometimes you're not even aware of it. So the idea with the adhere process is to look at that part of you that was disconnected, see what that part of you needs. Now, you know, trauma is this big thing that happens that makes you feel so powerless and small. So usually you're looking at a part of you that feels powerless and small. So I encourage people to get big, so big that it's this guardian aspect of themselves that can look at the situation, look at that part of you that's disconnected, and see what can you give that part of you that you're seeing. So it's all very empowering. You're giving it to yourself. You are the healer. You know what you didn't get because you're experiencing it on a regular basis when you get triggered. So the idea is to find those disconnected aspects because they're very active. And if you don't look at them, then those are the unconscious and subconscious responses to situations that could have an effect long term in your relationships and your life. So I always emphasize the most important relationship that you have is with yourself first. The better your relationship is with yourself, the better relationships you will attract into your life, and then those relationships expand out into the community and then the community out into the world. But we have to be willing to look at ourselves first.
Exactly. I really believe in it. And we have to take care of ourselves. If we don't love ourselves, we can't expect other people. We can't expect to take care of other people that have PTSD or dealing with trauma. So we need a few second break, and we come back and we continue this. Please subscribe to Panta Calhoun Transition channel and order my book Rules of Change for the Better. Tune up your mood and transform your life to reach your biggest dreams. Jeannine, what I realize in PTSD, and especially people with bipolar disorders, I've seen they do a lot of over-analyzing. So their mind is always busy because they're trying to find someone for their guilt, but they always think that they're guilty. People don't have attention to them, so they try to analyze the situation all the time. And when I go, because I had some relatives that I could relate, so I can see their problem. So what happened is that they look at the situation, they analyze it, they relate other people to that situation and try to find something out of it. And all the things that they are looking after, let's say they are always going for news, bad news every day. So they are looking at some, you see, it's up to you. Every day there are news, right? So they go to something that really bother them, or and they say, oh, this is real. Yes, it's real. There are all the time you can see bad things in the world. But that happens with them because they're very sensitive and they try to solve other people's problem, but they still have their own problem. And then when they're gonna be triggered, that's why they are bipolar, because as soon as they are triggered with a situation that they've been already hurt and really bother them before, again they try to hurt themselves and try to analyze it and that's why there are some severe cases that really bother others as well without knowing that they are doing this. What do you think about this personality, and what is your solution?
So when a client comes in, first of all, I don't get hung up on whatever the label is. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, we don't diagnose the way traditional medicine does. And we look at, first of all, what is the elements that are out of balance within each person. So you could have 3 of your family members in front of me, and I will give them a different suggestion based on what element is actually out of balance the most, that needs to come back into balance. So when we look at like inputs, food is one of them, water, our ability to breathe, and then perception. So you mentioned this, watching the news and always looking for the negative news and things like that. That type of counseling would involve looking at, is that input helping you or making it worse? And the idea is to help each client become more conscious of their own behavior. So it could be that, if they're overthinking, that would be the element of wind and space, which we call vata. It's all about movement. It's all about continuous thinking. But then if it's intense and it's got that fire behind it, that could be, the energy of pitta. And then if it's the lull, the other side of, bipolar, then that means the earth and water energy, which is kapha, it could be out of balance. But like I said, each unique individual will have a different, unique suggestion and counseling based on what is specifically showing up for them. So it's not a one size fits all solution. It's very individualized, So I would first start seeing whether or not they're open to reducing the amount of news they're watching, not quitting cold turkey, because the mind really doesn't like that, but seeing if we could find something else to fill that time with that could be more beneficial. Then looking at different breathing practices that will actually calm down the nervous system, the different foods that they're eating, whether or not they're drinking ice cold water, because that actually will throw a system out of balance. It dampens your digestive fire. And then the various counseling techniques, and looking at what are the adverse life experiences that they might be continuously thinking about in their mind. And so, like I said, based on where they're at in that session, so they may show up on a Tuesday and show different expressions, and we'll work on that. But then by the time they see me the following week, we deal with, okay, this is what's presenting itself now. So it's a very present approach.
And I see, as you said, diet is so important too. That's interesting, because when you see somebody with mental problem or some disorders, personality, you just think that, okay, he or she needs a psychotherapy or needs some therapy, but is not enough, as you said. That's interesting, because maybe I see in many of these cases, they may have um, weight, extra weight. They may have some digestion problem. They may have, that's why they have anger issue, because something is out of order.
Yes.
Hormone is out of order. Maybe if they go deeply in their body holistically and find the physical problem in their body, maybe they have much better comfort, and they can help, it can help them to relieve. And then you can work on their, as you said, with your own methods and solutions. You can work with them as a psychotherapist or a practitioner.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Can I see your book?
My book?
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations publishing of this book. I
Thank
like
you. So
abundance.
this was
Yes.
a fun process. So it's Abundance Beyond Trauma, Discovering Your Courage for Change and Commitment to Yourself. Now, if you can see down here, we have the fight, flight, or freeze, anger, all of the different things that come with trauma. And see, this is well, if you study the elements, this is a very depleting place to be. That's why the soil is all dried up. So there's deeper meaning behind this. And the three flowers, the flower themselves plus the color represents courage, commitment, and change. So I had fun working with the artist, Amanda from Day Long Daydreams, who created this. She was very fun to work with. And yeah.
Yeah, it's just so unique. I like the design. I like it. So tell me about your website. You said you have a pocket, right? Trauma pocket?
Oh, it's an I'm Triggered pocket guide.
Trigger pocket.
So if you go to the back of the book, whether you're in the e-copy or the physical copy, you can find the I'm Triggered pocket guide, which takes you into the adhere process on how to start healing yourself. Now, sometimes it might be a little challenging. So steps 1 through 3 are the easiest to use. And then if you're going to go deeper and you feel like, oh, I just don't think I'm ready for that, then I would, reach out. We could do a session, and it can be done online or in person. Interesting story. I just had a client who had a severe near-death car accident. And he got a hold of my book within 30 days of this accident. And he read chapter 6, which is all about the adhere process. And by the time we had our introductory call, he said, Jeannine, I just finished, chapter 6, and I want to tell you, I got behind the wheel for the first time today. And that was just from reading it, which was, very affirming, because he applied exactly what he read, and he had courage. He discovered his own courage, and he got behind the wheel. So then by the time we had our session earlier this week, after the session, he said, for the first time, I finally feel like I have my power back. So that's just one of the, many reasons why I wrote this book, is somebody needed it in that exact moment. And it was useful and helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this with us. And so this pocket is
It's a pocket guide.
Is it a course, or what is it?
No, it's a pocket guide. In other words, when you need it, you pull it out. So, it used to be we'd have something laminated maybe, and we put it in our pocket, we take it out and read it, but that's not the day and age we live in.
Pocket, not package. Okay.
Yeah, pocket guide.
Pocket guide. Okay.
Right. So it's the steps on how to come out of a trigger immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah, because that's the one thing I wish that I had. Something that I could reference.
So can you give us some example of this pocket guide?
Yes, I'll take you through it, actually. So let's say you're going through a trigger. The first thing you want to do is stop. Don't make any decisions. Why? Because once you're triggered, any decision you make is coming from a triggered place. That means those decisions may have an effect on your entire life. Never make a decision when you're triggered. That is the absolute most important bit of advice I can give. So number 1, stop. Don't make any decisions. And then you have to catch your breath. One of the frustrating things I found when I was triggered is somebody would say, take a deep breath. Well, it's really hard to take a deep breath when all that adrenaline's pumping through you and you're ready to either fight or flee, or you're frozen. So you have to catch your breath. And so I recommend that you do 2 quick inhales, because you're already having a rapid breath. So you do the, and you keep with that until you can finally start slowing it down. So you're not making decisions, you're doing 2 quick inhales, long exhale. And then you want to make sure that you're giving the mind something to do, because it either wants to fight, it wants to run away, or it's frozen. So we need to keep the eyes moving and give the mind something to do. So that's when you want to locate 3 objects or something that's living that represents this time and space. So in my office, there's a plant that grows on the ceiling. I have water in my teacup, and I can see the beautiful tree outside the window. That lets me know, okay, I'm in the present moment, and I've had to move my eyes in order to locate these objects. My mind's been given something to do, my eyes are moving. continually following my breath. Now, why is breath so important? Wherever the breath goes, the mind follows. So if you've ever been in an anxious moment, look at your breath. You're either holding it or it's already rapid. Once you calm it down, the mind naturally calms down. So the breath is the most powerful tool we have and the easiest to forget.
Wow,
Now,
I love that.
now
Yeah, go ahead.
the third step is to identify your well-wishers. So that means people that you trust in your worst moments, people who know you get triggered. And just by thinking about them, sometimes that will help calm you down. Or there are people you can actually pick up the phone or send a text to, hey, I'm having a moment, need some support. Or in my case, I didn't trust anybody. So I could not identify well-wishers. And instead, I depended on the ocean. The ocean felt safe to me because that was the place I could always just give all of my traumas to. And so I would imagine the ocean, or I would have a video that I would pull up and watch the waves. And that actually helped calm me down. And again, you continue with the breath. And at some point, when your breath is under control, you can start breathing regularly. Now, those are the three most important steps. But now let's say you'd like to actually heal whatever triggered you. And this is where the adhere process comes in. So the word adhere means to be true to. And so it's an acronym for explore, discover, heal, integrate, and relate. So the first one is to explore. Explore what triggered you. And it could be a person, it could be a moment, and really hone in. And in my book, there's an I'm triggered worksheet to help you really discover what were you feeling? What was the moment? Was it a sound? Was it a smell, etc.? And then once you discover, step two, what that trigger is, then you can start looking at what do you need to heal? So that's the third step. So let's use an example of fear that I use in the book. I would have a fear of abandonment within my friendships. And so when I did this process, what I explored and discovered was a 3 or 4-year-old version of me who was left home alone by her parents. And so here she was disconnected, because that's what triggers are, they're a disconnected aspect. And she's sitting here in this environment where she hasn't been fed, she hasn't been bathed. And the scene is what my psyche has created. It's not necessarily the actual event. It's what has basically accumulated because she's been disconnected for so long. So when I see this part of myself, I realize, wow, she really needs all of the essentials to be nourished and loved, and she's not trusting at all. And so there's this interesting interaction that will happen between your bigger version and the smaller version of you to figure out what do you need to heal. And so I needed to mend her blanket that she had. I needed to clean up the space she was in, to let in light into that dark scenario. I needed to bathe her, but in a very appropriate way because the adults around her had been inappropriate. And I had to build a trusting relationship. So in this healing, I brought in some toys, and I just set a teddy bear there, and she grabbed the teddy bear, and I told her, hey, you can keep that. I promise I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to abandon you. And eventually she came out of that darkness and into a field of wildflowers. And in my book, there's a beautiful image that I had an artist, Susanna Kervig, create for this particular healing. So now here I am, I've healed this part of myself, but now we need to integrate, because remember, it's been disconnected. So how do you integrate? Well, once it seems like you've given that part of yourself everything that it needs, then you try to do something that will allow a deeper connection. So in this particular case, I held her hand and we walked through the field of wildflowers, and I watched her grow up until she reached the present age. And then she merged into me. So the two of us became one. And the idea is to try to figure out how to do an integration, whether it's looking into each other's eyes, basically looking into yourself, matching the breath until the two of you become one. So that's integrating. Well, now the funnest step, which is to relate. Well, you're a whole new person. You've now integrated with a part of yourself that's been disconnected for however long. You need time to figure out, who are you now? That means the people around you will need to adjust as well. And sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's not so subtle. So we've done, we explored, we discovered, we healed, we integrated, and relate. Now I like to test things out. So always go back and test that trigger. Put yourself back there within your mind. Does it still have the same charge? If it doesn't have the same charge, you're good to go. And then we can start working with the breath to come out of that healing session. But if you are still triggered or activated, then you're going to go back through all the steps and you're going to keep doing it until it loses its charge. So in the case with the accident client, basically I had him go through in slow motion every moment of that accident as the car flipped over, as he thought he might die. And I had the larger, more higher self, so to speak, come in and supported him. And he's doing all of this. I'm just facilitating. And so he went from having flashbacks about this to, oh, I'm supported, I'm calm, I'm safe, I'm protected. And that's why he feels more empowered now and more whole.
Wow, I love it, especially the one you talk about that little girl, which was you, and then relate, integrate, relate. That was so beautiful. I like this method.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully, my audience can find your book and enjoy it, especially when they are triggered with something and they know that there is hope always, and there are some healing solution that you can find and heal yourself and relate this to your body as well.
Yes.
Do you have any other words, anything to add?
Anything's possible. The healer is within you. You might just need some support to awaken that healer within. And if that's the case and you'd like to work together, you can reach me at goodbyetension.com.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you
Thank
for,
you.
yes.